So once again, welcome to some review slides. This one's looking at vocation. Again, as all of these I hate to sound like a broken record, but just I want to make it absolutely clear these are not exhaustive reviews of everything that might be on the test, especially individual tests. I'm usually not going to add those into the review slides. These review slides are pretty much overview slides of kind of the broad information of each one of these categories of psychological measurement. So this is going to be on looking at vocational or career assessment, and I'm going to be reviewing some of the broad theories, a couple of the broad points, but again, for the test, make sure that you actually are familiar with the individual tests, how they're used, what kind of questions they have, and those are indeed listed on the study guide. So the first thing I'd like to note is that one of the broad aspects that differentiate vocational testing is whether they're using absolute level of agreement versus relative level of agreement. So absolute level is basically the extent to which you like each of these items. So every single item, you're going to be able to rate whether you like them or dislike them. So for example, dissecting frogs, like, dislike, neutral. Analyzing data, like, dislike, neutral. Selling magazines. So it is possible for someone to be neutral on all three of these. It is possible for someone to say they dislike all three of these. And it's also possible for someone to say they like all of these. Now, some tests basically look at relative level. So in these, you're having to make comparisons between behaviors. So for instance, this case, you need to mark at least one. You have to mark one as like for or L for least, one for most, and then one is implied neutral. So basically, in this case, you're given a pair of three items, and you have to choose of these three, which one would you most like to do, which one would you least like to do. So you're no longer given an option of saying, I wouldn't like to do any of these. You have to choose one. There's a forced choice of comparisons here. The reason that some tests use these relative levels is to basically avoid the possibility of someone just disliking everything. And also sometimes by using these relative level comparisons, it's a way to make the tests a little bit shorter. So if you're making paired comparisons, often you can cut the length of the test down. And one of the things you're going to find when you look at the individual vocational tests is many of these tests are very long tests, 200, 300 plus items. So any kind of methodology that can be used to make them a little bit shorter and easier to take is something that has been pursued. So not every single vocational or career test involves Holland's hexagonal model of general occupational themes, but many of them either incorporate directly, build off of it, or have very similar themes. And this is the idea of trying to categorize people's interests into kind of 6 broad categories. That depending on how you answer on all these various questions you're given, you're going to get a score in each area. So how much do you like to be investigative? How much do you like to spend time thinking about problems, solving problems? How much time do you like and what do you enjoy about creating things, being artistic? How much did you like items that are associated with helping others? How much were you focused on kind of enterprising and selling? How much were you basically focused on just making sure everything's organized and in the right patterns or order? And finally, how much do you just like actually doing work, actually doing the work itself, getting your hands dirty, so to speak? And once you have a profile of someone, they're going to have scores in all of these, and usually you'll be given your top 3. You can then use that to compare careers that have also been rated on these 5 factors. So, for example, being a professor is often seen as an IAS. It's investigative thinking, it's artistic, creating new research, coming up with cool ideas, but it's also social, helping other people, teaching. So there was a lot of different inventories we discussed. The one I want to focus on a little bit more is the one that's most commonly used, the strong interest inventory. And also by reviewing this, I'm hoping to give you kind of an idea of what to be looking for in the other scales as you study for the test. So basically, what differentiates the strong interest inventory is there's 3 types of questions. So there's statements that are basically categorized on a Likert scale, and these are specific behaviors that might be encountered on different types of jobs. There's a second set of questions that express preference between 2 categories. So the first set of statements are statements that fall much more into that category where you are being able to make absolute choices. And then we're moving forward into the second area, which is you're having to make those comparative choices, dealing with things versus dealing with people. So having to choose one or the other. And the final set of questions is actually just a set of kind of personality self-descriptors. So based on these three sets of questions, and there's over 200 in the Strong, you actually get three levels of results. You get your occupational theme, so that Holland RIASEC typology or model. You also get 25 basic interest scales, so basically a list of the various parts of or different types of broad occupations and how much interest you should have in them. And then finally, an actual detailed list of 211 actual specific occupations and how much of a fit you would be with each of those. So just wrapping up what we can say generally about career interest measures, all of them. So again, remember that on the slides I went through a lot more than just the Strong. Overall, we have a lot of evidence that they are quite reliable. So these are all objective tests. They involve people scoring, and then those scores are used to actually create profiles, occupational profiles or interest profiles. And generally, reliability is, of course, tested by tests and retests, so giving the same person the test over and over again and seeing if the results are the same. And we do find a fair amount of evidence that these are reliable. In other words, if someone is very drawn to a social occupation cluster every time they take a test or a different test, you're going to see the same results. They have fairly respectable validity. So when we actually ask, does these tests adequately predict whether someone will actually go on to that career, choose that major, or if they go into the career, will they actually feel as if they made the right choice? We find not perfect prediction without a question, but we do find respectable validity. Most of these tests were actually created and normed, or basically the validity and reliability was checked quite a while ago. So there is a move to actually try to update these tests with more modern psychometric theories and techniques. For example, factor analysis, looking to see if the data actually supports, for example, that RIASEC, the Holland Index, is truly 6 separate clearly identifiable constructs. There's a strong movement towards online completion. And also more and more moving the test to accessing abilities along with interests. In other words, not just measuring whether the person is going to be interested in a career, but they also have the ability to do well on that career.